Well, good morning and welcome back to making that 8-yard kilt from 2 lengths of 4-yard cloth. And as always, motion sickness alert. I'd said that, or in a previous episode, I said, yeah, I wouldn't tune in until it was lining time, but it occurred to me this will answer a question that somebody had recently. So this morning I've shaped and sewn the outside end of the inside apron. I've basted all of that down. I've cut out the back and steeped. So next stage, of course, is canvas, but somebody had asked recently about canvas. Now, I've cheated a little bit in that I've already empirically figured out how much I needed. Pardon me, because I was working with the long roll, because this is one of the things that one of my standard practices is my canvas it's always 5 inches wide, and it's ripped the long way from the roll because warp versus weft this way stretches more than that way, so it's along the length of the thing. So yeah, I'd empirically figured out how much I needed and then put this away. I'll need this again, of course, for the front apron, but starting at the end of the apron, I'll lay a turn back which is set about a finger's width. Let's call that inch-ish, but a finger's width is sufficient back from the edge because we need a little bit of clearance for the lining leader to be sewn on, and the end doesn't protrude past the folded over bit, and in this case it's slightly inset. So let's just pin that in place. And then carry it on, laying it flat. Now again, this, for the umpteenth time, it doesn't have to be tailor's canvas, and it can be quite lightweight. It can be, well, I don't like fashion denim because it's got an element of stretch in it. It's, I don't know what synthetic fiber they're putting in there, but I don't like it. And what I've started to do is, we'll come back to this in a minute. What I've started to do is do a second turn back at this end because, well, for starters, it adds a bit of shape, or it adds a bit of support for the, just a second, I'm just seeing how far that overlap is. That can come back a little bit. Let's just bring that back a hair. Because since I cut this, but then by sewing the steeking, these lines, I just noticed they were a right angle to the fold, but now they're slightly this way, so I have to compensate for that. Now my seam is there. Of course, I'm always aware when I remove cloth, I'm decreasing the amount of seam allowance for future alterations. You can just see my seam there. I have to be so careful. These shears are so wonderfully sharp that I can easily go through too many layers and ruin a piece of work. That's a little better, I think. This one has to come back a ways. And this, actually, let's do it this way. Okay, that's better, because that means I'm not gonna, you can see, possibly see it gaping there. Let me put this behind. We don't want that. We want a slight overlap. And if I put it fortuitously, you see that line there between blue and green. If I go to there, I have a nice little overlap, which is better than that. Okay. So let's bring that to there. I'm also going to turn that in. It's just going to be slightly easier to sew. Now the reason for doing this, for doubling the canvas here, is remember the buckle, the buckle's going to be sewn about there. So by giving it an extra thickness of canvas right there, I think we're doing a good thing. Okay, let's give that a bit more of an overlap, because we don't want it to gape open. Okay. And of course, this is rocketing away up that direction, so I want to work on these two folds. They're about the same amount of overlap in each, rather than one being more overlapped than the other. Okay, I think that's it. It always winds up bending my pins too. Oh yeah, as far as I'm concerned, this is absolutely the best way to put in the canvas. Instead of a narrow strip, instead of a wide strip of expensive tailor's canvas, which of course is absolutely useless in this case, or at least it's wasted in this case, because tailor's canvas is meant to shape, and you don't have any problems with shape when the whole body is under tension, that is being shaped around your torso. So we don't need to waste expensive tailor's canvas on that. And yeah, now let's put one more pin here, because later on I'm going to base that. But I'm going to sew this first, baste this, and then sew this. The other thing is, there's my first there's my first seam. So this is my first pleat here, or my last pleat, the end pleat. I can feel one seam, there's the second seam, so I'm not gonna stitch past that, because there's too great a chance of going through all layers of cloth. Now this is 5 inches wide, so therefore 2.5. Two and a half, like so. 1.25 I can do by eye, because these are guides. They're nothing more than a guide. Okay, so that's ready for the herringbone stitch that you've seen me do elsewhere. Keeping an eye on the clock, because I got a couple of friends coming by. We're doing some boat building today. Now, again, we want to reduce the top finger width to single width, because later on we're going to be sewing our lining to it. So I'm just going to knock off the corner. There we go, single width. And I'm going to turn that in too. Because, I mean, I suppose because if it's turned on, if it's left on top, I mean, sure, the stitching is going to hold it down, but there's always a chance of later on for however it occurs, but it has occurred, a piece of canvas folding over and then causing a bit of a lump under the lining, and you can feel that. So I'm just going to crease that just to see where I have to turn back. There we go. So the folded over canvas when sewn this way is not going to create a bulge later on. Now I can feel, this isn't necessary because I can feel it with my fingers, but I'm just showing. Okay, great. So there's the canvas in. I realize I've showed it elsewhere, but here's yet another demonstration. Hope that helps. And I'll check in a bit later. When I'm looking at this, you see this because of the radius of the kilt brought about by the taper between seat and waist. We have, now that we've steeked it, we have this cloth sort of rearing up here, and I think that's telling me, from past experience, that's telling me that when the time comes to press this, I'm gonna have to press it over a ham. And I looked and I asked around, and there's no name for that procedure. It's, you just press it over a ham. Ham being the hard stuffed pillow, as it were, of canvas. Okay, there we go. That'll hold us for a while. I'm going to get back to work. Motion sickness activated.